Raise your hand if you've ever been hurt by someone you trusted. Yes, all of us. Isn't it strange that the deepest wounds don't always come from strangers, but from the people closest to us? When someone hurts us, it feels like a storm inside, anger, pain, betrayal. But let me tell you something very powerful. Holding on to that pain is like holding a burning coal in your hand, waiting to throw it at someone else. But in the process, you are the one who gets burned. Hurt is something that none of us can escape in life. No matter who we are, how kind we try to be, or how careful we are with others, there will always come moments when someone will hurt us, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes deliberately. It may come from a careless word spoken by a friend, a promise broken by a loved one, a harsh criticism from a colleague, or even an act of betrayal from someone we trusted deeply. The reality is, being hurt is not an exception in life. It is a part of the human journey. If we expect that everyone will always treat us with the love, respect, and understanding that we desire, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment, because even the closest relationships have moments of misunderstanding and pain. The problem is not that hurt comes our way. The real problem is how we handle that hurt when it arrives. When we face hurt, our natural tendency is to ask, why me? Why did this person do this to me? But the truth is, every single human being goes through such moments. Just as we might have been hurt, knowingly or unknowingly, at some point in our life we may also have hurt others, even without realizing it. Sometimes our words, our actions, or even our silence can wound someone else, even though it was never our intention. This realization is important because it helps us understand that hurt is not something that only happens to us. It is something that happens to all of us. It is part of the give and take of relationships and part of the imperfections of human nature. If we carry the belief that we should never be hurt, we will live a frustrated and angry life. It is like expecting the ocean to have no waves. It is not possible. People will sometimes disappoint us, not because they are bad people, but because they are human. They have their weaknesses, their flaws, their blind spots, and their struggles. And in their moments of weakness, they may say or do something that leaves us in pain. Instead of resisting the reality of hurt, we must accept that it will come. That acceptance does not mean we are approving of it. It means we are wise enough to recognize life for what it is. The rain will fall, storms will come, and people will sometimes hurt us. That is the nature of the world. But here lies the deeper wisdom. While hurt may be inevitable, suffering is optional. We cannot control what others say or do, but we can always control how we respond to it. If we allow the hurt to take root in our hearts, if we keep replaying it in our minds, and if we let it harden into resentment, then we are choosing to suffer long after the moment has passed. On the other hand, if we recognize that being hurt is part of the human experience, and if we decide not to let that pain dictate the course of our inner world, then we rise above it. We cannot stop the arrow from being shot, but we can stop ourselves from carrying the arrow inside us for the rest of our lives. So when hurt comes, instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Try to ask, what can I learn from this? How can I grow through this? Because pain, though unpleasant, has the potential to teach us lessons that comfort never can. It can teach us patience, empathy, strength, and humility. It can remind us of our own humanity and make us more sensitive to the pain of others. When we see hurt as a teacher rather than just as an enemy, we begin to transform our wounds into wisdom. When someone hurts us, our natural instinct is to respond immediately. The moment words are spoken against us, our tongue wants to reply with sharper words. The instant an action wounds us, our heart wants to retaliate with equal or greater intensity. It feels as though reacting instantly gives us a sense of justice, a feeling that we are not weak, that we can stand up for ourselves. But the truth is, reacting in the heat of the moment rarely brings peace. Instead, it often leaves behind more damage than the original hurt ever did. Anger spoken without thought is like fire released without control. It burns everything in its path, including the one who releases it. Think about those moments in your life when you reacted immediately out of pain or anger. Perhaps you raised your voice at a loved one, said something cutting to a friend, or lashed out in frustration at work. Later, when your emotions settled, you regretted your words. You wished you had taken a moment to think before speaking. Words, once spoken, can never be taken back. They leave scars, they create distance, and sometimes they permanently damage relationships. That is why reacting instantly is dangerous, because at that moment, we are not guided by wisdom, but by raw emotion. Emotion may be powerful, but it is not always accurate. When you are hurt, the best gift you can give yourself is a pause. That pause may be a few seconds, a few minutes, or even a few days, depending on the depth of the pain. In that pause, you give yourself time to breathe, to think, and to see the situation more clearly. In that pause, you shift from being a victim of your emotions to being the master of them. People often think that silence or restraint in the face of hurt is a sign of weakness, but it is exactly the opposite. It takes great strength to remain calm when every cell in your body wants to explode. It takes true power to stay composed when anger pushes you to react. Imagine a glass of muddy water. If you keep shaking it, it stays unclear and dirty. But if you put the glass down and let it rest, slowly the mud settles and the water becomes clear. The mind works the same way. When someone hurts us, our mind becomes disturbed and clouded with negative emotions. If we react immediately, we are reacting from that muddy, unclear state. But if we pause, if we let time pass, our emotions begin to settle and our clarity returns. Then we can see the situation for what it truly is, rather than through the lens of temporary anger. Not reacting instantly does not mean you allow people to walk all over you. It does not mean you suppress your feelings or avoid addressing the issue. It simply means you choose the right time, the right words, and the right state of mind to respond. A response given with calmness has the power to heal, while a reaction given in haste has the power to break. There is a world of difference between the two. Reaction is automatic and uncontrolled. Response is thoughtful and intentional. Reaction creates more hurt. Response creates the possibility of resolution. When you learn to pause before reacting, you take control of your inner world. You are no longer a slave to every word or action that comes your way. Instead, you become someone who decides consciously how to deal with situations. You gain respect in the eyes of others because they see you as balanced and wise. And most importantly, You protect your own peace because you are not allowing anger to push you into decisions and words you will later regret. So the next time someone hurts you, remember you don't have to answer immediately. You don't have to fight back in that very moment. Breathe. Pause. Let your heart and mind settle. Then, from a place of calmness and clarity, decide how you want to respond. That small pause can be the difference between a broken relationship and a stronger one, between regret and wisdom, between a heart that is restless and a heart that is at peace. When someone hurts us, our first instinct is to label them as bad, cruel, or heartless. We take the act of hurt and attach it completely to the person's identity, as though one action defines who they are in their entirety. But the reality is, every human being is much more than their mistakes. Just as we don't want to be judged forever by the worst thing we have done, we must learn not to reduce others only to the wrongs they have committed against us. Separating the act from the person is an act of wisdom and maturity because it allows us to address the wrong behavior without condemning the human being behind it. Imagine a child who misbehaves in school. A good teacher doesn't label the child as a bad student forever. Instead, the teacher recognizes that the act was wrong, but the child still has potential, goodness, and capacity to learn. In the same way, when people hurt us, it is important to recognize that their action may be wrong, but that does not mean their entire being is evil. If we start hating the person instead of the behavior, our heart becomes consumed with negativity. Hatred poisons us from within. But if we can learn to hate the act and still see the person as a flawed human being like ourselves, we free ourselves from bitterness. This doesn't mean we excuse or justify their behavior. Wrong is wrong, and hurtful behavior must be recognized as such. But by separating the act from the person, we create space for compassion and understanding. We begin to see that perhaps they acted out of ignorance, or because of their own pain, or due to circumstances we may not fully understand. Many times, people who hurt others are themselves carrying wounds that have not healed. When someone speaks harshly, it could be the echo of the harshness they have endured in their own life. When someone betrays, it could be a reflection of their own insecurities or brokenness. Recognizing this doesn't excuse the action, but it helps us not to lose perspective and not to allow hatred to dominate our hearts. Think about yourself for a moment. Haven't there been times when you made mistakes and later wished people had not judged your entire character based on those moments? Haven't you desired forgiveness, patience, or understanding from others when you failed? If we expect grace for ourselves, we must also be willing to extend it to others. Separating the act from the person gives us the ability to correct what is wrong without destroying relationships completely. It allows us to say, I don't like what you did, but I still value you as a person. That is the beginning of real healing in relationships. When you hate the act, but not the individual, you also protect your own peace. Because hatred requires constant energy, it drains your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Carrying anger towards a person keeps you chained to that moment of hurt. But when you separate the behavior from the person, you can dislike what happened while still freeing yourself from the poison of resentment. You can set boundaries. You can decide how much space that person should have in your life. but you no longer need to carry the heavy burden of hatred. This principle also aligns with deep spiritual wisdom. In many traditions, it is said, love the sinner, hate the sin. The idea is that the essence of every human being has goodness, but sometimes that goodness is covered by ignorance, pain, or poor choices. By directing your dislike towards the action instead of the person, you keep your heart pure while still standing firm against wrong. Separating the act from the person doesn't mean you allow them unlimited access to your life after they hurt you. You can forgive and still keep distance. You can value them as a person, but still choose to protect yourself from repeated harm. But the inner shift is important, because when you see them as more than just their mistakes, you open the possibility of change, growth, and reconciliation, either for them or for yourself. And even if they never change, at least your heart remains free from the chains of hatred. When someone hurts us, our immediate thought is often, how could they do this to me? We fixate on the pain, the betrayal, the disappointment, and we rarely stop to think about what might have led them to act in that way. But if we take a step back and try to see the world through their eyes, we may begin to uncover reasons that don't excuse their behavior, but explain it. Many times, people who hurt others are themselves carrying invisible wounds. They may be battling insecurities, frustrations, or personal struggles that push them to act in ways that cause pain. A harsh word might be the overflow of their own inner turmoil. A betrayal might be rooted in their own fear of being abandoned. An act of unkindness might simply reflect the hurt they themselves have never resolved. When we understand this, it shifts our perspective. Instead of seeing the person only as an enemy, we begin to see them as a fellow human being who, like us, is navigating difficulties, weaknesses, and imperfections. Understanding someone's perspective doesn't mean we justify their actions. Wrong is still wrong. Pain is still real. But it means we choose to look deeper than the surface. We stop painting the person in black and white and instead begin to see the shades of gray that make up their story. And when we do this, we realize that much of what people project onto us has less to do with who we are and more to do with what they are going through. Imagine someone shouting at you angrily. The easy response is to take their words personally and fight back. But if you could see that this person just went through a terrible loss, or that they are struggling with crushing pressure at work, or that they grew up in an environment where shouting was the only way they knew to communicate, wouldn't that change the way you receive their words? You may still not like what they said, but you would understand that the source of their behavior comes from a place of pain, not necessarily from hatred toward you. That understanding doesn't remove the hurt, but it softens the edges of your anger. This perspective also teaches us empathy. We live in a world where everyone is carrying hidden battles, financial struggles, broken relationships, childhood traumas, fears of failure or loneliness. Sometimes the person who hurt you may be projecting onto you the very same pain they cannot handle within themselves. If they insult you, it could be because they don't feel good about their own worth. If they ignore you, it might be because they themselves are craving attention they never received. If they cheat you, it could stem from a scarcity mindset, a fear of not having enough. Again, none of this justifies their actions, but it explains them, and understanding the why behind the hurt helps you not to take everything as a personal attack. When you begin to understand others' perspectives, you not only grow in wisdom, but also in compassion. You realize that holding on to anger against them is like punishing someone twice, once for their mistake and again for their suffering. You realize that many people are prisoners of their own unhealed wounds, and their actions are simply the symptoms of a deeper pain. Instead of adding more bitterness into the cycle, you can choose to step out of it by responding with maturity. Sometimes just a little bit of empathy, just the willingness to say, maybe they are going through something I don't see, can be enough to protect your peace. This doesn't mean you must excuse repeated mistreatment or keep harmful people close. Understanding someone's perspective doesn't mean tolerating endless abuse. It means you see them clearly for who they are, a human being with flaws just like you, but one whose actions are shaped by battles you may not fully understand. That shift helps you release the burden of resentment. Because when you hold on to anger, you chain yourself to their mistake. But when you see their hurt, behind the hurt they caused you, you loosen that chain and free yourself from carrying their actions endlessly in your heart. The greatest freedom comes when you realize that what they did is about them, not about you. Their behavior is a reflection of their inner state, not your worth. And once you truly understand that, you stop allowing their actions to define you. You learn to rise above, to let go, and to preserve your own peace while still acknowledging their humanity. That is the power of perspective. It transforms bitterness into understanding and pain into a pathway of growth. Forgiveness is one of the most difficult choices a human heart can make, especially when the wound is deep and the memory is sharp. When someone wrongs us, everything inside us cries for justice, for apology, for repayment. We feel that holding on to anger and bitterness somehow keeps us strong, that it reminds the other person of the wrong they did. But in reality, when we refuse to forgive, we are not chaining them, we are chaining ourselves. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It is like carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones everywhere you go. You may think you are punishing the one who hurt you, but in truth, you are the one exhausted, weighed down, and trapped. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is not about saying that what they did was right. It is not about pretending that the hurt never happened. Forgiveness is not weakness, and it does not mean letting someone off the hook without accountability. Forgiveness is an act of liberation. It is the decision to no longer let that person's actions have power over your peace of mind. When you forgive, you are not approving of their behavior. You are refusing to let their behavior control the rest of your life. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it releases its hold on your present and future. Think of it this way. When you replay the offense in your mind again and again, you are giving free rent to the person who hurt you. They may have moved on with their life, perhaps not even remembering what they did, but you are still carrying the weight of that moment. Forgiveness is the act of evicting them from your heart's space. It is saying, I choose not to let this pain live inside me any longer. And when you make that choice, you immediately feel lighter. you discover that forgiveness is not for them, it is for you. Of course, forgiveness is not always easy. Sometimes the hurt is so deep that the thought of letting it go feels impossible. That is why forgiveness is often a process, not a single moment. It begins with the decision that you no longer want to be bound by bitterness. It continues with small steps of releasing the anger each day, until one day you wake up and realize the memory no longer has the power to wound you. The scar may remain, but the pain does not. And that scar becomes a reminder, not of weakness, but of strength, because it shows that you overcame what could have destroyed you. Forgiveness also opens the door to healing in relationships. When you choose to forgive, you give space for reconciliation, for conversations, for understanding. Even if reconciliation never happens, forgiveness still allows you to close the chapter within your own heart. It prevents you from becoming like the very person who hurt you. Because when you hold on to hatred, slowly you start to resemble the same bitterness that was once directed toward you. Forgiveness protects you from becoming what you despise. Many great teachers and spiritual leaders throughout history have said that forgiveness is divine. Why? Because it elevates the human heart beyond its natural instincts of revenge and retaliation. It transforms us from ordinary reactors into extraordinary responders. It is easy to hate, easy to hold grudges, easy to carry resentment. But it takes courage, humility, and inner strength to forgive. And when you do, you align yourself with the highest form of love, a love that refuses to be imprisoned by pain. Remember, forgiving someone does not always mean allowing them back into your life in the same way. You can forgive and still set boundaries. You can forgive and still choose distance. Forgiveness is about what happens inside you, not about forcing a relationship that may no longer be healthy. It is about saying, I release this hurt. I free myself from this burden. I choose peace over bitterness. And in that choice, you will discover a freedom that nothing else can give. When someone hurts us, it is very easy to hold on to that pain as if it were a possession. We replay the incident in our minds again and again, almost like a movie stuck on repeat. We recall every word, every expression, every detail of that moment, and with each replay, the wound becomes deeper. Carrying that memory, carrying that pain, becomes like carrying a heavy suitcase filled with rocks. At first you think you can manage it, but the longer you hold on, the heavier it becomes. And eventually it doesn't just weigh down your arms, it begins to crush your spirit. This is what emotional baggage does to us. It prevents us from walking freely into the present and robs us of the joy that is waiting in the future. Life is already difficult, filled with responsibilities, challenges, and unexpected struggles. If we add the baggage of past hurts to it, we make the journey even harder than it needs to be. Imagine trying to run a race while dragging chains tied to your legs. You cannot run fast, you cannot enjoy the race, and you are constantly exhausted. That is exactly what happens when we hold on to old wounds. The pain of yesterday steals the energy of today. The bitterness of the past blocks the blessings of the present. Letting go of emotional baggage doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It doesn't mean that the hurt was not real. It means that you choose not to carry it with you anymore. You acknowledge that it happened. You learn the lesson it had to teach. And then you lay it down so that it no longer defines your life. Holding on to pain is like keeping old garbage in your home. At first it's just there, but over time it begins to rot, to smell, to infect the entire atmosphere. Letting go is like cleaning your space. It creates freshness, clarity, and room for something better. One of the reasons people struggle to let go is because they feel that holding on to the hurt somehow keeps them safe. They think, if I remember this pain, I will never let it happen to me again. But the truth is, holding on doesn't protect you, it only poisons you. It fills your heart with suspicion, anger, and fear. And soon you start looking at everyone through the lens of your old wounds. Instead of protecting your heart, it builds a wall around it, and that wall not only keeps out pain, it also keeps out love, trust, and joy. Letting go is an act of strength, not weakness. It is saying, what happened to me will not define me. I will not allow the mistakes of others to become the prison of my soul. You are not erasing the past. You are choosing freedom from it. And when you release that burden, you find yourself lighter, freer, more at peace. Suddenly, your heart has space for laughter again, your mind has room for new possibilities, and your soul feels open to the beauty of life. Sometimes letting go means forgiving. Sometimes it means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means simply deciding that your energy is too valuable to waste on something that cannot be changed. Whatever form it takes, the essence of letting go is this: you refuse to let yesterday's pain steal tomorrow's peace. So ask yourself, what am I still carrying that I no longer need? Is it anger from years ago? Is it a betrayal that happened once but I relive it daily? Is it a harsh word that still echoes in my mind? All of these are heavy stones in the suitcase of your life. And the only way to travel far, the only way to live fully, is to put that suitcase down. You deserve the freedom of a heart unburdened. You deserve the peace of a mind that is no longer chained to the past. And you will find that the moment you let go, you don't lose anything, you gain everything. Every hurt that we go through in life carries within it a hidden lesson, though in the moment of pain, we often cannot see it. When someone wounds us with their words, betrays our trust, or treats us unfairly, our first reaction is to feel broken, angry, or helpless. But if we step back and look at these experiences not only as wounds, but also as teachers, we begin to see that every painful moment has the potential to shape us into a wiser, stronger, and more compassionate human being. Pain has a way of teaching us lessons that comfort never could. Success, happiness, and ease make life sweet, but challenges and hurts make life meaningful by forcing us to grow in ways we otherwise would not. When you are hurt, you learn patience because you realize that healing takes time. Just as a physical wound does not close in a day, emotional wounds also require days, weeks, sometimes years to fully heal. In that process of waiting, you discover inner strength you didn't know you had. You learn that you can survive longer than you thought, that you can endure more than you imagined. Pain stretches the capacity of the human heart, and in that stretching, you become more resilient, more steady, and more prepared for the storms that life will inevitably bring. Hurt also teaches you empathy. When you have walked through the fire of betrayal or disappointment, you begin to understand what others feel when they go through the same. You become softer, kinder, more considerate. because you know firsthand the weight of suffering. Often, the most compassionate people are not the ones who had the easiest lives, but the ones who faced struggles and chose to let those struggles make them gentle instead of bitter. Every tear you have shed becomes a bridge that allows you to connect with someone else in their time of pain. Your scars become proof that healing is possible, and they become a source of hope for others. Another lesson that hurt teaches us is the importance of boundaries. Sometimes we allow people too much access to our hearts, and when they misuse that trust, it breaks us. But in the breaking, we learn discernment. We learn to protect our hearts wisely, not by building walls of isolation, but by setting healthy boundaries that allow love in and keep toxicity out. Hurt reminds us that not everyone deserves the same level of access to our emotions and our lives. This is not about becoming cold or suspicious. It is about becoming wise and careful with the treasure of your heart. Pain also teaches us perspective. When everything is going well, it is easy to take life for granted. But when you are hurt, you begin to realize the value of peace, kindness, loyalty, and genuine love. You start appreciating the people who stand by you because you now understand the difference between those who lift you and those who pull you down. Hurt sharpens your vision. It helps you separate what is shallow from what is deep, what is temporary from what truly matters. There is also a hidden strength that hurt unlocks within us. Many times, we think we cannot live without certain people, or that we cannot survive certain disappointments. But when we are forced to, we discover that we are far more capable and resilient than we ever believed. Hurt pushes us out of our comfort zone and forces us to grow. It reminds us that even in brokenness, we can rebuild. Even in loss, we can find meaning. And even in pain, we can discover purpose. So when life hurts you, don't just ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What is this teaching me?" That shift in perspective transforms suffering into growth. It doesn't mean you deny the pain. It means you allow the pain to do its work in shaping your soul. Every experience, no matter how bitter, can become a stepping stone if you let it. And when you look back years later, you may realize that what once broke you actually built you, what once wounded you actually prepared you, and what once felt like the end was in fact the beginning of a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate version of yourself. One of the most misunderstood aspects of dealing with hurt is the belief that forgiveness means allowing people to continue hurting us. Many of us confuse forgiveness with weakness, as if letting go of anger requires us to keep tolerating harmful behavior. But this is not true. Forgiveness is about freeing your own heart from bitterness, while boundaries are about protecting your space, your dignity, and your well-being. Both are essential. To live in peace, we must learn the art of drawing healthy boundaries. When someone repeatedly hurts you, it is not unkind to create distance. It is necessary. A boundary is not a wall of hatred. It is a fence of wisdom. Walls are built from fear and resentment, but boundaries are built from self-respect and clarity. By setting boundaries, you are saying, "I value myself enough not to allow repeated harm, but I also value you enough not to let my heart fill with hatred toward you." Boundaries protect relationships from total destruction because they provide space for respect. Without them, hurt keeps repeating in a cycle, and resentment keeps growing until the relationship breaks completely. Think about a house. You lock the doors at night not because you hate the people outside, but because you want to keep your family safe. In the same way, setting boundaries in relationships is about safety, not rejection. It is about ensuring that you are not repeatedly wounded, drained, or disrespected. When you allow someone to cross your limits again and again without consequence, you are teaching them that their behavior has no cost. But when you lovingly, firmly, and clearly define what is acceptable and what is not, you teach both yourself and them that respect is non-negotiable. Boundaries also prevent bitterness from taking over your heart. If someone keeps hurting you and you keep allowing it, your heart will eventually become a reservoir of resentment. You may forgive once, twice, even 3 times, but if there is no change in behavior, you will soon find forgiveness harder and harder to give. By setting a boundary early, you are protecting your ability to forgive because you are preventing the wound from being reopened repeatedly. Forgiveness and boundaries go hand in hand. One heals the heart, the other protects it. Sometimes people feel guilty about setting boundaries. They think, if I distance myself, I am being harsh or unkind. But true kindness is not allowing someone to keep harming you. True love is not blind tolerance of abuse or disrespect. True compassion is balanced with wisdom. Even the most compassionate gardener knows that weeds must be cut, that certain plants need trimming, and that fragile flowers must be protected from harsh weather. In the same way, our hearts must be tended with care. We must nurture love, but we must also guard against repeated harm. There is also a misconception that setting boundaries means cutting people off completely. That is not always the case. Boundaries can be gentle. They can be expressed in the way you choose to engage, how much time you spend, what conversations you allow, and what behaviors you refuse to accept. Sometimes the boundary is as simple as saying, I will not respond to shouting, let's speak when we are calm. Other times, it may mean limiting contact or even walking away from a toxic relationship. The form of the boundary will depend on the situation, but the essence is the same. You are choosing peace over chaos, dignity over disrespect. And remember, boundaries are not just about keeping harmful people away. They are also about teaching yourself discipline. They remind you not to cross your own values, not to allow your anger to explode uncontrollably, not to compromise on your principles for temporary comfort. In this way, boundaries protect both sides, you from harm and the other from your uncontrolled reaction. So never feel guilty for setting boundaries. They are not a sign of coldness. They are a sign of wisdom. They are not a rejection of others. They are an affirmation of your worth. By creating space where respect can grow and where repeated hurt cannot flourish, you preserve your peace and give relationships a chance to exist in healthier ways. And if someone truly values you, they will respect your boundaries. If they do not, then their distance is a gift in itself. Boundaries are the silent guardians of your soul, ensuring that love can exist without being destroyed by pain.